Hello and welcome to Cutting Through the AI Hype in Canada. My name is Derek Marinos, coming to you from CGI's global headquarters in Montreal. I'm pleased to be your host for the first in a series that will explore how artificial intelligence is transforming some key business sectors in Canada. Today, we'll start with a closer look at the financial sector, specifically generative AI's role in enhancing the customer experience, creating operational efficiencies, and how it is offering groundbreaking insights into risk management. We are presenting practical perspectives for your consideration today. So let's embrace the journey into the future of AI, powered by AI, of course, with our distinguished panel of experts who will help you navigate a rapidly evolving digital landscape. Andrew Donaher is a leading AI analytics and data expert at CGI who delivers actionable insights that drive competitive advantage for clients. Franck Descubes is one of CGI's leading experts on open banking, who specializes in corporate strategy and enterprise transformation for financial institutions. And Chris Juryn is an AI leader who specializes in crafting strategic AI solutions and seamlessly implementing them to production to drive transformative results for CGI's clients. Welcome to you all.
Morning, Derek. Thank you.
Good morning, Derek.
Depending upon where in the world you are.
Thank you. Andrew, let's begin with a simplified explanation of what generative AI is and how and why we got to this transformative moment in time.
Well, I think it's a great question, Derek. I think it's important for people that AI isn't new. We've been doing machine learning and predictive modeling in a variety of ways. The ways that what's really new is generative AI, as you mentioned, and our ability to generate text, to summarize information, to generate images, videos, audio, radio. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to listen to any of the AI radio out there, but it's impressive. And really, it's a lot of work that's happened in around 2012 in Toronto, actually, around deep learning, and then again in 2017 around RNNs and transformers. Have really helped us to take natural language processing, understanding, and machine learning, and elevate that again to be able to summarize and generate this content. It's opportunities that we're seeing and the results that we're seeing, even in the last 6 months, in terms of being able to use it to the point where I wouldn't even call it a hype cycle. We're actually operationalize these results faster than we've ever done before. To be honest, the hype cycle doesn't actually apply in this instance.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. And Franck, there are obviously key challenges facing financial institutions. And what are you hearing on the ground?
Yes, thank you for the question, Derek. Well, as you know, financial institution banks pretty much rely on data for decades, right? Pretty much their inceptions. They had tons of data, both about their client, both commercial and private, about the market, about the economy. And they started to leverage it a few years ago. But we must acknowledge that the focus of data has increased a lot over the last years for many different reasons, whether it is a regulatory purpose or new technology like Gen AI. So the focus is really high those days on data. However, if everyone is talking about AI or Gen AI, and then those model needs data. Right? You need data to fuel the model, and sometimes you need tons of data. So you need to do some prep work to set your data right before you can leverage it or you can scale it. So the prep work is truly important, and that many financial institutions are investing tons of resources to set the data in the right place.
Yeah, and data plays a large and a very key role in this. And I just want to get a little call out to our audience. If you would like to hear from any of our panelists and you have a question for any of them, please present one into the chat. We'll be happy to get to it at some point during the show. Franck, that's an interesting segue, because we need to delve into AI strategy, platform modernization and integration. And Chris, I'm going to turn to you first. And let's look at the strategic, roadmap for AI success. What would that look like? And let's talk about, your approach with respect to AI Foundation's offering.
For sure. So we see a lot of clients, they want to get started so quick. We want to make sure that we are able to start driving results right away. For that, we worked with many different clients in doing this, and we've actually codified a structured approach that helps our clients responsibly go from 0 to AI in less than a quarter. What we're really focused on is, we know, again, that this is a journey. Franck was talking about that, about how there's work that needs to be done. Everyone's at a different place, and we really focus on meeting our clients where they're at. So we focus on having a 4-phase approach here. Number one, we start with strategize. We're really connecting that data to the business priorities and looking to co-generate those AI use cases, looking to the industry, scanning the landscape, understanding where the top and emerging use cases really sit, and then seeing which ones are relevant to the organization that are going to help drive those business outcomes. We then take those use cases, really look at prioritizing them. So we evaluate the use cases based on our prioritization criteria that we've developed, and it really is looking at a couple things. Technical feasibility. How likely can we actually do this? I want to do a lot of things that I may or may not be able to technically get done. So how well does it solve a customer need? Does it align to those business goals that we looked at? And can it help drive that competitive advantage that is always so important? We then move on. We have those top use cases. We move on to where I get really excited, to the build phase, and that's where rubber the road. We're actually developing these low-cost AI models based on the actual data of the client. That's important because we want to make sure that the use cases that we're solving, we're validating. Does the model actually drive the value? Does it not? And we want to have those live use cases to understand that. From there, seeing where we have value, and then we finally move to mobilize, which is the last phase, and that's really where we're building out that path to production. And it's looking at how do you bring in the best practices around responsibility and other areas of AI to implement within the organization, and what we need to do to be successful.
Interesting. And Andrew, Chris, mentioned meeting clients where they're at, and I found that very interesting. And I know that's an important driver for you, and especially the role of platform modernization and what it plays in a client's journey as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing organizations a lot, helping organizations a lot with right now, is obviously with the demographic profiles in Canada. I think 21% of the Canadian population is currently over the age of 65. And 2016 was the first time ever that there were more people over the age of 65 than under 65 in Canada. And the reason I share that is because, especially in the financial world, there's a lot of legacy applications out there. So one of the things that we're helping organizations with is using generative AI to interrogate legacy applications and be able to elicit and automate the requirements that are in those applications. We inherited over 100 apps from one particular client that didn't have any clear documentation on it. So what we started doing is using generative AI to interrogate those and elicit the requirements and elicit the business rules embedded in the app based on what's happening today. Then we're also using the generative AI to actually recode applications in modern languages. So by eliciting that, understanding that, document the requirements, we've been using it to generate, we're on app number, one particular client, we're on app number 4 right now, just in terms of being able to convert that code, but also do the business explanation of what's actually happening and any of the changes that we've made as we moved it. And so when you're in a struggle for talent, when you're exposing risk, when you're trying to do things at scale, leveraging generative AI to help drive through those productivity opportunities, as well as driving through, the support for helping people to become more productive with their activities. So 62% of time is wasted by people in the knowledge industry hunting for data and hunting for information and hunting for requirements.
Yeah.
So the ability to use it is critical. And the one thing I'll add to that, Derek, and Chris mentioned it, is the way that we approach it is always human in the loop, right? None of this is auto magical. That's the first thing to understand. And so we've always got a human in the loop when you're looking at responsible AI, so that it's making suggestions, providing direction, providing opportunities for business analysts, for executives, for users to be able to modernize that. One particular organization in the US, we're actually using generative AI to analyze their entire databases in real time and be able to create queries and then apply visualizations in real time to those for the analysts, so they can eliminate that non-value add time of hunting for the data and hunting for the answers. So a lot of opportunities out there we're seeing right now.
Yeah, human intelligence.
Andy, like ramping up those people, right? Like we talk about all the databases or databases everywhere, the schemas everywhere. No one knows everything. The value that brings to people when they're coming into the organization is crazy.
Yeah, and like I said, none of that is auto magical. There's work to be done, but the speed at which we can do it now is a different game.
Yeah. Really valuable insight. Thank you, Andrew. And Franck, I'd like to pivot to you now on this too, because when we talk about like integration is a key factor here, and especially how AI may be strategically integrated into existing financial service workflows and processes to maximize efficiency and profitability. There's opportunity here for sure.
Yes, sure. Well, I would like to echo what Andrew just said. Usually in financial institutions and mostly in banks, I mean, the portfolio of application is overly complexified, right? It's really something. Sometimes we account for 1,000 of different applications. So just want to take one very pragmatic example. I'm sure you heard a few years ago about automation, right? Mostly around RPA, robotic processing of automation. So FI have heavily invested into RPA to boost efficiencies. But when you start by doing that, you first grab the most obvious cases, the easiest one to tackle. And then you reach a threshold. How can I boost my productivity, my efficiencies, and reduce the complexity of my legacy by automation? That's where we see different kind of technology bring into one solution to address more complex issues. So RPA with, for instance, OCR for the paper, optic character recognition, or NLP for the voice, natural language processing. So smart automation or hyper automation, as we call it now, you can assemble the pieces together to address much more complex automation tasks. But you need an engine to govern that, to pilot that, to monitor that, to help you design your control tower and to assemble the different technology. That's where AI and Gen AI came into piece, to assemble and govern all the technologies. I mean, if you think about very simple bank process like credit decisioning, part of it is very straightforward, very easy to automate. You get a simple mortgage with some cash down for an employee, nothing complex. However, you can have exactly the opposite, very complex credit decisioning for commercial clients with highly customized, multiple exceptions, documentation, paper-based, a lot of the different third-party provider embedded into the process. That's where you need to assemble different technology governed by AI to help automate and boost efficiencies of very traditional processes of a bank, like credit decisioning. Banks have been doing that for centuries now. It's just the way that you can automate it, which is different.
Interesting. An interesting point too, because when we get to the other side of this too, and Andrew, I'd like you to focus a bit on something really interesting that you brought up in meetings countless times, and I think it's of tremendous value. When we talk about customer experience, customer lifetime value, and the hyper-personalization experience, a lot to unpackage there, but in what ways may AI essentially be utilized to enhance customer experience and engagement in the financial sector?
Yeah, we focus on that a lot, actually. So we actually have a customer lifetime value framework. So within that customer lifetime value framework, we talk about know your customer, know your products, know your services, match and optimize. It's really a 4-step process. And with the hyper-personalization, being able to use generative AI and build context around your micro experiences with your customers. So for example, one of the things that we did was we built a chatbot pilot with around a mortgage advisor. And what that did, so we're all familiar with chatbots from, I can't believe I'm going to say it, but the days of yore of 2 and 3 years ago, with traditional applied AI. And it was basically, you know, a lot of FAQ work and trying to summarize what was already, or trying to just surface what was already out there, FAQs and whatnot. But with the generative AI, what we're able to do is be able to interrogate the different pieces of information that are available, provide context for who that customer is, and then actually be able to do calculations in real time to provide support. So all of a sudden, you've got this experience where on the front end, you're able to use generative AI where if you're using confusion matrices to test or whatever it might be, you can actually see your results improving. Your customers are getting their information faster. It's actually driving down the amount of time that customers are spending wasting time looking for information. So that's going to increase your ability to offer the right products and services. So that's going to also drive down your calls back into your contact centers. So if you use generative AI, you can drive down the number of contacts into your contact center. That's going to make your customers more happier. And then the other one is on the other side of it in your contact center, being able to use it to drive down the amount of time that those agents are looking for support. So all of a sudden, you've got customers that are getting their answers faster. They're doing fewer things to get it. You're freeing up time. You're enabling. Then you're able to use both, predictive and traditional AI in conjunction with the generative to provide that information with context in micro experiences across your platform, both in the physical world and in the digital world. So there's a lot of out there where it helps customers.
It all comes down to time, right? It all comes down to that. It's the most finite commodity on this planet. And I appreciate that answer. Thank you. I'm going to go to the board right now. We got a couple of questions from some users, some folks here from the audience that we'd like to engage. I'll take the first question from Kumar. Are the financial institutions ready to embrace AI at this stage? I'll fire this one out. Chris, why don't you take a shot at that? And then Andy, maybe we'll get you a quick perspective on that.
Sure. So there's a question, are financial institutions ready?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer is they kind of have to be, right? Like it's been thrust upon us, right? Like I remember I've been doing in the machine learning AI space for some years, and Andy was talking about the days of yore 3 to 4 years ago. It's been about 4 or 5 years that have been focused in on this. And at one time it was, AI, come on, like when's it really going to be there? When are we really going to see it? And we're like, it's here and it's driving value and it's being embraced. And what we're seeing is that for those that aren't embracing, that's going to really create a competitive disadvantage that's there, right? Like we've done work already in the generative AI space with one of the banks where we're actually taking regulatory changes and bills that are out there, using generative AI to understand those, and then develop the requirements and the test cases that are required to make sure that these changes are being reflected in the systems. And so this is sometimes a painstaking process that goes on, right? You got to read through these, you got to understand this, and then we're able to use generative AI to bring these to the experts. Again, this human in the loop. The experts still get them and say, hey, here's what we saw from this, and they add on to it. They get even better from the results of that, and they can improve on it. But now the time is being shrunk down. You don't have to spend as much time doing we'll say the easier stuff that's there. We worked with another bank that wanted to, in the payments area, that really wanted to look at how can we improve as there's changes that are going on in Swift and other areas to new message formats, using a bot to be able to query and ask questions around that, to say, like, when this field is changed, what should I do now in a date field, saying, okay, here's how you should go and do this. So now we're being able to bring people to become experts that might have been like lesser and have less knowledge around that. And then finally, another really cool example that we have is fraud detection. So a lot of times there's like rules-based engines that are being used, or some, maybe some supervised learning, and supervised learning being you label things as fraud, not fraud, and it figures it out based on that, to helping this bank actually move to unsupervised learning. So being able to go, it detects what is an anomaly. It detects where there's something that falls out, which is really important for fraud, because you can't just say what was fraud in the past we're going to find. Fraud's always changing. So these are some of the examples that are just driving huge value and being embraced by these organizations. And the ones that are seeing the benefits, and the ones that aren't are desperately trying to catch up. So that's where I see like it has to be there.
Yeah, the risk is being left behind essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Franck, a quick one as well from, no, I'll take one more question. It looks like Sylvie Thibault. How do you estimate the ROI on generative AI projects for your customers? Give me just a high level answer on that one.
ROI of generative AI project for your
customers? For customers. Yeah, if there's a way you can describe on a high level.
Well, we've been doing ROI for many years now, many decades. Things are not necessarily very different when you use the technology like AI or Gen AI or the one that is about to come after that, right? So we're talking about the same metrics, return on investments, increase of customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, depending on the case you're deploying your AI. So it could be the upsell, the cross-sell of product and services that you've been able to perform through deploying your AI chatbot. If it is in a call center, you can measure by the augmentation of productivity of your employee, of your call center, the satisfaction of your customer that call actually your call center, that would answer faster in a more accurate way, maybe in a more autonomous way. Since they're independent and can chat with a chatbot, not necessarily waiting for someone to enter the call. So it's pretty traditional, I would say. Right. How do we apply return on investment metrics? It really depends on the case that you're applying AI to, and then how are you able to measure actually the return on investment? Do you get the data, or do you don't get the data to measure it?
Yeah,
no, fair enough.
So, and I compliment Frank on that and say, you know, if you're looking, I mentioned it earlier around customer lifetime value and the 4 steps around that for know your customers, know your products and services, match and optimize. And the metrics that drive into customer lifetime value is how many customers do you have? What's your annual spend or your share of wallet, however complex you are in measuring that. And then the expected lifetime of an individual customer, which is 1 over the probability of churn. And so if you're looking at that, so number 1, looking at the probability of churn, you can drive through that and drive through that metric tree all the way into your operational metrics. From, you know, your total handle time for your, which is roughly SG&A for your contact center. On the merch side and product side, again, market share and annual spend per customer, and then finally your total number of customers, new and active, and you focus in on that metrics tree to identify which metric you're trying to go after, and then the solution, whether that be generative AI or whether that be traditional and predictive, like and some of the things Chris brought up around machine learning. Those are the tactics that are going to help you drive that metric.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of the things that, can I just talk about data for a second, Derek? Do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all. Data's the, you know, data is really the gold out of this.
So in Vancouver, we actually have a little AI dinner group I started. Me and a couple of C-suite people here in the community, and we get around and we talk about, you know, and they're not all AI people, but just a C-suite group. We get together and we identify how are we going to actually use it and what does it actually mean. It's super informative, actually. And the last one we had, one of the people brought up to me looking at an article called, it was it's time to start chopping wood with a blunt axe. And so one of the questions, and I think I saw it in the chat around, you know, how many is everybody ready for it? My data isn't ready. All of that. Your data is never ready. Your data is never perfect. Financial institutions have been doing AI and predictive modeling for years. And when we're starting to look at preparing your data and getting it ready, it's about being able to manage and use it. And when you're going to focus on your data governance programs and your enablement programs, you're going to focus on a use case and a domain of data around that. You know, I don't know if everybody's read the book, AI Superpower Wars. Great book. Kai-Fu Lee, one of the guys that started Google in China. And in it, he talks about the ability to manage data being critical for AI. So one of the stories in it, have a read if you'd like, just talks about how the age of the expert, you had five, an expert would tell you the five variables that were statistically significant that you had to look at. We're in the age of data, in the age of the data expert, we're looking at 10,000 variables and not necessarily only the ones that are statistically significant. So the reason I mentioned that book is in it, he talks about with Alibaba, for example, when they're looking for, they're doing fraud detection on the website. One of the variables, as Chris mentioned, when looking at unsupervised learning is the amount of time it takes you to type your name into the text box. It's not causal, but there's a correlation.
Right.
So when you're able to manage that data at breadth and start to look at it, and you've got your automated testing in place, and you've got your governance, and you've got your responsible AI ethics and measurement in place, you can start to surface these things and understand them and then leverage them. So in 5 years, we're not going to talk about AI. It's going to be embedded in everything we do in some way, shape, or form. And how we can manage the data and how we can ask the right questions and how we can do it responsibly are going to be the differentiators.
Yep. No, that is, yeah, it's pointing in that direction and it's moving in that direction. A really good point. And it brings us really to our next segment, talking about that competitive advantage through AI, operational efficiency. Chris, going to point to you on this one. How can financial institutions leverage AI to gain a competitive advantage, and what are the key areas of opportunity?
For sure. So we touched on earlier some of those different ones that we've seen where we're seeing the productivity benefits, the better access to knowledge management. I know, Andy, you were talking about the amount of time people spend on that. Those are like great examples of where there's some of that opportunity, the low-hanging fruit for generative AI to kind of bring that in, and we can get started and go very quickly within that space. One area that we're seeing a lot, we talk about responsible AI and those type of pieces, but also within the security standpoint, that how do we make sure that we have a secure system? One area there, one example that gets super interesting is there's a large American financial institution who just released that they're facing 45 billion attacks a day, which is like, the number is just unfathomable. My brain doesn't work that way of per day.
Mind-boggling.
It's huge, right? So this is doubling. Like, they're seeing like exponential growth on the attacks that they're getting, and AI is kind of driving some of that, right? Because of the opportunity that the bad actors can bring to that. So how do we counteract that? How do we ensure that we don't have these data leakage or these issues of having unwanted access to our systems? And so really it's a bit of an arms race that we're seeing right now in that space, that we're seeing new opportunities, kind of like the fraud example of it. You can't just do what's been there before. You have to look at where things are going. And this is really an opportunity for companies to embrace it and understand that there is sometimes another darker side to this, but how can we use technology to influence society and our organizations and our people in a positive way? This is something that we bring to the table from CGI. We have something, an offering, an OffSec, offensive security. So it's like not offensive, like, I'm offending you, but it's like getting on the
playbook.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that our cybersecurity team does, and that's really like looking at where are you vulnerable, and using these latest technologies to find those things, to make sure that we're staying safe. So that's a way I see, like, not just looking at the productivity, the gains that we can have, but also how do we continue to be safe, secure, and be able to operate in the way that we want, to not have business disruption, is a way that I foresee more and more investment going into that, because it's not as sexy as some of the other stuff, but it is absolutely needed, and it's very impactful.
It's vital and important. It's top of minds for a lot of executives. We're going to flesh that out a little bit later in our conversation. But I would also like to tap into here for a second, Chris, and explain how CGI is leveraging artificial intelligence as a key differentiator in the financial services sector.
For sure. So CGI has been working in the financial space in the Canadian financial space, for sure. We work with the top banks across there, have relationships, and have actually intimate knowledge in that space. One of the things I think that really differentiates CGI, if you remember when I was talking about the different phases that we have of our 12 weeks to AI, one of them is the build phase. We're hands-on delivery organization that really we get stuff done, right? Like that's something that we have in our organization. It's not just from strategy of saying what you should do, but we actually go and do it and drive that value. And it's something that I'm always proud of. It's kind of like it gets back to my technology roots of just wanting to, get my hands on things and actually drive value in that. But being able to go from like the beginning of strategy, implementation, support, and operationalization and AI at scale, like these are all skills that are tough to find across an entire organization. But having someone that can focus on actually helping you identify the value and then get to showing the value and being able to stand behind that I find that that's something that when I do it, it lights people up and it really shows the value and differentiation of CGI.
Interesting. And Franck, Chris alluded to some of the security concerns earlier, and we're talking about that, how it is top of mind. So I'd like to segue to our next segment and talk to you a bit about risk management, regulatory compliance, and security here. I think this is an important touch point, and we need to dive a little deeper. Franck, first of all, how is AI transforming risk assessment and risk management in financial services, and what are the implications for long-term stability and compliance?
Well, regulation and compliance are financial institution is a big part of being compliant and regulated, right? Sometimes we complain about that we have to invest so much money into compliance or regulation, but at the same time, it raised the barrier of entry for any newcomers, and that's an industry where regulation and compliance is pretty heavy. It has been, and I guess it will still increase over the next coming years or coming decades. So if we want to be pragmatic, Chris already touched base on a few opportunities. We see tons of opportunities in applying AI and Gen AI to risk and compliance department, whether it is for augment the accuracy of the model or to boost the efficiency. So if you want to augment the accuracy, for instance, we can quote very pragmatic use cases like fraud detection, like transaction monitoring, for instance, when you need to analyze transaction data and identify suspicious pattern, set up alert, notify suspicious activity, improve risk processes of transaction monitoring, for instance, or offensive and defensive measure for cyber identity and access management to be able to better detect intrusion, malware, and other stuff. If you need to boost efficiencies because as a financial institution, as a bank, you're investing tons of cash to be sure to be to set the standard of the regulator, you can think about stress test. How do you stress test bank and run simulation in a much more efficient ways? How can you automate credit risk evaluation, for instance, or credit scoring for payment processing? How can you automate compliance reporting and audit, for instance? Analyze market data and news to assess the potential economic and political risk impacting a bank operation. So we can think about many different use cases where you can boost the efficiency of the bank and streamline a little bit the tons of resources that you're forced to deploy to be compliant to the multiple regulator that you are dealing with, whether it is on a provincial base, federal base, or at the national base. But there are two main questions before you go too far and you exit the test, pilot, proof of concept, proof of value, even if the possibilities are truly amazing. The question is, how do I test it, and then how do I scale it? Because the stability of the model is key. You don't want to jeopardize your operation in front of a regulatory body or miss a requirement because of an hallucination problem of your AI algorithm, right? Because the consequence is pretty tough. You're out of the market right away, or you impose a huge penalty. So the stability is really key. And before you use real data into your real operation of risk or compliance operation, you better test it and retest it and be sure that you again test it that the stability of the model is definitely right.
Yeah, that discipline is absolutely required, and nobody wants to get embarrassed in front of a regulator with basic mistakes like that. And,
no,
and you're quite right in pointing that out. So some of the challenges are clear and they're on the table, but there are opportunities here as well, Franck. In terms of regulatory compliance in the financial sector too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. As I said, you can use it to augment the accuracy of your detection, fraud detection, or transaction monitoring, for instance. Today, you're able to detect, I don't know, one false transaction per 10,000, for instance. You can reach a much more higher threshold with AI tools or with GenAI. You can adapt because, as Chris say, the current threats are probably not the ones that are coming in a few months or a few years. So you can learn and test and deploy in a much more faster way than you used to do it a few years ago, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's important. And Andy, talk a bit about retention and satisfaction as well.
So yeah, we talked a lot about the opportunities to use AI in terms of, Chris mentioned payments, platform modernization, customer interactions. The other side of this is employee retention and employee satisfaction. So I mentioned the demographics earlier in Canada. Globally, I think the latest stats I've seen, according to the World Economic Forum, are by 2050, 1 in 6 people is going to be over the age of 65. And so, that the need to globally, I know we have a lot of people here from around the world globally, the challenges around retaining and keeping employee satisfaction are foremost. And so there was a great paper written by, and I'm going to get this gentleman's name wrong, the first one, Bryn Jofferson from MIT with Lee and Raymond. It's called Generative AI at Work. It was released in April of 2023, so relatively ancient by current standards. But if you've not read it, I encourage you to go have a look at it. And what they did was they used, the reason I find this paper super interesting was one of the first peer-reviewed studies on the use of generative AI at work. They did it for a Fortune 500 software company. And it was over 5,600 people in the study where they actually looked at using OpenAI, generative AI, in the contact center support. And so they found a 14% improvement in productivity. That was super interesting, early version. We're going to start to see more of that as we get better at it. But to me, the most important part of this study was actually around the employee satisfaction. So one of the things they saw was actually an increase in employee engagement. And oh my goodness, I can't remember the exact number right now. But if you look at the employee engagement numbers, what they said was it didn't make the experts that much more efficient, right? That 14%, if you look at the distribution of it. What had happened was the people that had been there for 2 months started to become as effective as the people that have been there for 6. And the people that have been there for 6 started to become as effective as the people that have been there for 2 years. So if you're looking at that training, you're looking at removing that non-value add work. So as your employee satisfaction increases, your employee retention is going to increase, right? So that's a really important point that we need to start to consider more, I think, is not just being, so yes, it's paramount important to be, looking at operational efficiencies, and looking at, driving multi-product relationships and fraud and payment efficiency, but making sure that we're looking at how to leverage this to improve the employee experience, to improve retention, and then, thereby improving your SG&A and your financial metrics, right? That's a key driver that we get all excited about looking at some of the other side of it. We don't always hit well enough.
Right. And we've had a really, productive discussion on all aspects from operational efficiency, security, risk management. But Andrew, I'd like to pivot now to responsible AI, ethical considerations. Could you articulate at least CGI's position for us on the responsible use of AI, and what ethical considerations should be addressed when implementing AI in financial services?
Yeah, so we've actually signed on to Canada's Voluntary Code of Conduct. Our global lead for ethical AI is Diane Gutu. I think you knows Dr. Diane Gutu. Her PhD was actually in this. And our position on this is that we're not going to we're not replacing humans. we're looking to make experts more efficient. It's always human in the loop for us. And so when we're looking at, we have an AI risk assessment matrix that we go through to evaluate transparency, bias, security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for every project. And we do it ourselves internally. We're working on an AI digital twin we were building for buyer safety, and we had to go through the risk assessment internally. And we had to look at any of the risks associated with those core principles, and then look at our risk mitigation techniques, and then reevaluate on the end. And starting to be able to look at, the battery of tests that you're going to have to evaluate bias, the battery of tests that you're going to have to do to evaluate transparency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, as we start to, it's really going to put more pressure on the QA side of the world, to be honest, and the automated testing side of the world, as we start to certify AI products in financial institutions for unintended risks and bias and security, to scale that out to a battery of 10,000 tests, 2,000 around transparency, 2,000 around bias, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where, Chris mentioned it earlier too, around the machine learning capabilities to perpetually do model management, looking at model drift, looking at model risk, looking at model security. The perpetual management issues around that is where everybody falls down. So number one is being able to get the right amount of data and manage it appropriately. And number two is on the end of that is model management and realizing those operational gains. That's where organizations have fallen down in the past, and where that's paramount to us, where it's always human in the loop and it's always around risk mitigation. Because our striving theme across this, you mentioned it off the top, Derek, is speed to trusted action. And you can only get the trusted action if you have all those questions answered. That's the key to it all.
Right. You can't move if you don't have the answers.
And if you don't trust the answer.
Right. And that's the most important thing. We do have another question from the audience, and I'd like to dip into it. We got a question from Nana Amodako. How do we control the amount of customer data that will be needed to generate information that will benefit them? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a few different kind of pieces that'll go into this, right? So it's like the way that you get a differentiation, or you really can bring a lot of value to some of these models, especially when we look at when we're talking about generative AI and some of the pre-trained models that are out there, the different LLMs, from Microsoft, Google, Meta. There's a few others that are being leveraged there. We need to bring the data to there to really differentiate ourselves and get these unique answers that are required. So it's going to be a balance, right? It's going to be that the number one thing, and there was a question earlier, how do we measure the ROI, right? To me, number one is defining the ROI first, of what is that return I'm looking to get? What value do I think I'm going to get from this? If I'm talking about the personalized to generate the hyper personalized information that we're talking about, I need to understand how am I going to measure that? What do I expect to get from this? Something I say often is, if you can't fail, you can't learn. Really important that we have what we're trying to do, and then we start feeding into the models and start training into the model based on those outcomes that we need to get to, and we start feeding all that into there to train the models better, to bring that the customer experience up that we can do with this. So it's not always going to be just the amount of data that's there that we need to worry about, but it's also going to be, how do we bring that in and then have that feedback loop to constantly measure and improve from there. Very often, we look at more is better when it comes to the data and AI, but it has to be clean from that standpoint. And Franck was talking exactly on that. There's data there, that's out there, but where are we seeing some of the issues? It's that it needs to be useful data that is linked and can drive that value to you. And the only way you can define useful is by the outcomes you're trying to create.
Thank you, Chris. And Nana, I hope that satisfies your question. Okay, we're coming slowly but surely to time. And before we go, I have one question I really want to hit on, and it's future looking. And, and I want to hear from all three of you. What are the emerging trends and future innovations in AI that financial service executives should be aware of and may leverage those innovations to drive greater operational excellence? Franck, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess we already touched base on many use cases where you can apply AI or Gen AI to boost your efficiencies, whether it is your business processes, your operation, your risk and compliance department. Though maybe in the coming future, model will be so much powerful that you can reach a new threshold, a new wave of productivity, since bank and financial institution rely on data. Pretty much, it's a pure data-based institution with zero factory, raw materials, or patents. It's really all about the data. But I would say that if I have to bet, I mean, I don't know the future. It's hard to make predictions, especially when you're talking about the future, right? But I would say that the most promising application is probably around cyber security. We already are registered tons of attacks, and I see in the chat whether it is tons, million, billions. It's already in terms of billions. And when it will go exponentially, it will raise exponentially. So I hope that AI will help us to build intelligent models, smart model, to be able to learn, to adapt, and to counter major cyber threats that is coming from the market, both externally, when your website and your infrastructure is under attack, or internally, you can detect suspicious activity or employee that do not behave the right way, or that you're maybe there's a threat, a window of opportunity to leak data. So to better detect proactively and stop the attack or stop the leakage before it truly happens. Right now, it's always a game of sheriff, and you need to catch offensive and defensive. When you're happy to put in place new countermeasure, there's the nearest threat coming that is able to defeat your countermeasure, and there's always a game. I hope that we'll be able to leapfrog that and to protect our institutions from those massive threats and data leakage.
Thank you very much. Andrew, to you next.
There's so Franck at the operational side. I'm going to hit the customer side. The ability to test and create content at scale for your customers is and test that, do multivariate testing at scale to identify those messages of effectiveness. So in addition to all the things we talked around about OpEx and CapEx today, the ability to generate that content to help surface your products and services in an efficient and effective way to drive that customer experience and drive that revenue creation. And then the one other thing I'm going to talk about really quickly is the ability to use quantum computing for predictive modeling and risk management. So I've used quantum in an operational capacity myself. It's here, it's real, it's today. And the ability for us to do things leveraging quantum on that side of the world for the financial institutions is about to be unleashed in a massive way.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and Andy, it's interesting. We were talking about cybersecurity and quantum. There's always the encryption conversations that go on. We won't go into that right now, but I'm love the chat with other people on that as well. So to kind of add on to some of the stuff that Andy was talking about there, like I see that hyper personalization and immediate recommendations getting so much better, right? Like that to me is where I start to get excited, is that there's so much data that we have, so much information we have, and we can be serving people and our customers in such a more robust way that's going to have impact and benefits to them. Right? I look at some of the opportunities that are out there, right, on like investment and money management solutions that are out there. Like we're seeing a trend that's going on, right? People are moving from an active to a passive fund management, and part of that's just due to these passive funds getting better because of data and better pieces. But there's been a lot of dynamic shifts going on, right? We hear about the retail investors that are kind of being able to take over, some of the meme stocks and things like that. But even just the introduction of the Bitcoin fund, there's more and more stuff going on with crypto, and there's a lot of change that's going on, and people are wanting to know, okay, well, what for me? Is that right for me? And the answer is not always cut and dry. And being able to have these better piece of information to our financial institutions to be able to give even better advice, that's a huge opportunity of or an example of that personalized information that I know as a customer, I want to hear what's good for me, not just for the masses. I want to have that, right? And then as we continue to move down these paths, I see opportunities to introduce like some of the digital IDs and integrate that to reduce fraud, better KYC that goes on with that. And that's going to continue to drive that and a need for that. It can't just be, I just applied to something recently and they wanted me to send a picture of some of my IDs. And I'm just like, man, like really? You want a front and back picture like that? let's keep moving forward and have that. And there's a lot of opportunities to kind of the adjacent systems or things like that are going to need to be done to really drive the value is what I see.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you to you all. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with the audience today. It's greatly appreciated. For a deeper dive on today's discussion, we'll reach out via email with a link to a blog that we're going to have posted for you so you can have a look at that. And anyone interested in contacting a member of our panel may do so via LinkedIn, or please visit us at cgi.com. Our next engagement on cutting through the AI hype in Canada will be in early April when our CGI subject matter experts dive into the manufacturing sector. On behalf of the entire CGI team, I'm Derek Marinos. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.